Bill, I said to Bill, I don't know if you need to even say my name because I only see 3 people in the audience who don't know who I am. But, I'm Lucia Zacha, as so eloquently presented, thank you. My parents were Bill and Jennie Zacha, and we moved here in 1958. I was only 3. I didn't have a lot of choice. Most of you moved here as adults and saw it and fell in love with it and came and stayed, which is, my parents came up for the weekend with Harry and Jean Crotty, who were also artists in Marin, and it was their anniversary, and they came up and camped on Navarro Beach and came into Mendoza's to get beer, I don't know, groceries, and they saw town and they all said, this is it, and my father said, this is what I've been looking for all my life. They came back up the next weekend, bought a house, and spent about a year working on it. It's right next to the Joshua Grindle house on Little Lake Street. It's the one house from the corner, the Murder, She Wrote, you know, the Angela Lansbury's home in Murder, She Wrote. And that year it was overwhelming. All their friends kept coming up with them to help renovate the house, so it was exhausting, and by the end of the year, Mama was ready to just lock the doors. All right, the house is done now, no one else can come, because it needed a lot of work. And they started the art center. I don't know the exact chronology. As I said, I was 3, and so my memories of being here in those days were very limited. And the first, I think probably my first memory of Mendocino was when we walked into the house for the first time, and it's the high Victorian ceilings, and in the kitchen, the wallpaper was the Albert Brown house. The wallpaper had curled off the walls, and of course I was so big, so I don't know how far out it really, but it looked, to me, I remember it sticking out like 3 or 4 feet and just being held up with masses of cobwebs. Because the house hadn't been occupied in 30 or 40 years. And that was one of the mansions, one of the beautiful houses in town that you'd think people were there, but when the mill had closed, everyone had left, or most people had left. After they got settled here, my dad taught at the high school for 2 years, taught art, which, you know, gave them at least a foothold to get established and get everything running with the art center and the gallery, and the rest is history that you can read up at the art center or on the website. As far as they go. As far as I go, I mean, I could tell you stories of as much history as I could think of, but it's all going to be guided by the fact that I was a little kid. And the things I remember are the 40-foot pine tree at the entrance to the art center between the front sidewalk and where the main gallery is now, on the east side of the sidewalk. There was this huge pine tree. Well, I've raised children now, and if I had known my children to be doing what my mother didn't know I was doing, I mean, we'd just scamper up the tree, 6, 7, 8 years old, climb this pine tree like it was a ladder, and just sit up there and hang. My mother, poor thing, or lucky thing, didn't know. And I knew all the good climbing trees. All the way along the front of the art center were, I think they're laurel. There are a few of them kind of broken down now, and they've come back in bush form. And I think there's some kind of a laurel. They were great climbing trees. Jim, when they first got the art center, they were all still there. And Jim Myers was a gardener, and I don't know, George might have helped him. He came from the city and pruned them all for 2 or 3 years. They kept them kind of, and then they got too big and rangy. So we also had the fences. I knew a lot of the Mendocino fences, and we would, you know, walk them and slide down the ivy, and the secret pathways through town. And at night we were allowed to be out because it wasn't chaotic like it got later. And when we were 11 or 12, we would be running around the streets at night. My parents were at the art center. See, I was lucky because they were always at the art center. And from a very early age, I was allowed to just be there if I wanted to or not. And so I knew town pretty well, and it was fun. We had, Nick, do you remember the movies, when we had the movies at the art center?
Yeah.
We had Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights. We had Daddy, I don't know, some wonderful company would rent all the old films, all the classics, and except expensive ones like Gone with the Wind. We had, you know, the old black and white films, and he would have cereals, and we had Tiger Woman and Mark of Zorro and not Rocket Man, that's the new one, Captain America, Perils of Pauline, and then they would have, like in the big movie theaters, and we would all the kids would sit in the back row because you didn't have a very good view, and Dirk Myers would make us coffee with 1.5 pounds of sugar and 15 spoonfuls of coffee made. It was like this syrup, and we all thought we were so cool, and my father let us get away with it. Being here with them as parents, as people to grow up with who are, I learn now with my kids what influence you have, how you expand their brains by what you put in them. And the dinner, now I'm going to start crying. Okay, you guys have to help me here. The dinner table conversations with all the artists who lived here, who came up because of the art center and because of my parents, and just as a matter of course, there would be Charles Stevenson, and there would be the Reeves or the Erlencotters or the Myers and Dorr, and Mama would have started dinner with expecting it to be Daddy and me and her, and he would call from the gallery and say, well, Monica and Irma are coming, and there are 3 students from the art center who just got in, and I'm going to bring them for dinner, and then we'll take them up and let them into their apartments. And all of a sudden, Mama's got 7 people or 8 people she's doing dinner for. But they were wonderful dinners. The milk carton never got on the table. She had the table set, as you all know her. She was very elegant and lovely, and taught me not to put the milk carton on the table. You pour the milk and put it back. But growing up with the people, and people say, oh, your parents, they moved here, and a lot of people moved here. There were a lot of artists, and there still are people coming because they were drawn here because of the beauty in the town and the art center. I kind of flinch when people say, oh, the Look article, young man saves an old town. He got lucky in that he was inspired, and a lot of people who loved the same thing were inspired and came with him. If you mention the Look article to some of the old-timers, it's an insult. No, actually we had a big conversation about it yesterday, because they were kind of hurt that, what do you mean our town didn't need saving? He ruined it, or he did this, or he changed it. So we finally settled on last night in the conversation, he changed an old town. But I don't think Look is in business anymore, so we're not going to try to get them to change it and reprint it or anything. But because of all these people who moved here, I had just this incredible influence of all these different artists. I didn't turn out to be an artist. I was so saturated with it by the time I was 5. I had to take the art classes, the children's classes. I hold the record for the longest, or the most thorough completion of all the courses of children's art classes ever offered at the Mendocino Art Center. And when I got to be about 11 or 12, I rebelled, and I cannot do another wax dip candle. I cannot do another iron the wax paper with the tissue paper between it, and you make the little collages and then you iron it. No, my children never did one, at least not with me. Maybe they did in art classes, but got it all out of my system by the time I was 12. So I hung around at the art center. I played at the art center. I knew all the artists at the art center, and they all knew me. And I could call and just say, is Mama there? And I guess I was probably the only kid who was calling and asking that, but I always thought it was wonderful because they would say, Jenny, and Lucia is on the phone. But back to the people who came here. So many of the artists who settled here did so just because they were, I don't know, so affected by the area, the people who were moving here, the community that was developing, where they felt that it was a safe and free place to create their artwork and to learn more about it. There's so many people came for classes. It was the first time they came was to take a class at the art center, and then they ended up renting a cottage, and then rented it 7 years in a row, and then bought it, and now are retired here. It's was great. It was really wonderful. And growing up, seeing the art center itself, the buildings develop. I remember when each one was on the drafting table, and now can I make a pitch?
Absolutely.
We need a new roof at the art center. Anyone who wants to help us pay for the roof. The buildings, a lot of them are now 40 years old. They were built in the early 60s, so we're getting to that turnover time of refurbishing. And then in 1970, they built the theater, and that's where my love is. I was a drama major in college because of having been in the theater at the art center. And my parents were in plays, and I was in plays with them, and now my children have been in plays, so and that's where my creativity got to be passed on to my kids. Like I said, I'm not an artist. I did a little stitchery. I figure I took one kind of I think it was a teenage art class where we had 2 hours of this and 2 hours of that, and I liked the lost wax jewelry process, because I figured it was the least noisy, the least, if you wanted to stop, you just stopped and you turned your burner off and leave. There's not slivered glass getting into your elbows. You're not sticking yourself with needles. But I never did it because I didn't have the creative urge behind it. It skipped me. My children are both artistic and creative, but I'm not. I make a good apple.
Theater arts.
Theater arts. But it's a different type of creativity because you're doing someone else's script. You're not thinking of the script. I'm not going to go there. I don't know. Where do I go? Now that I have everyone's attention, what would be the next thought I would carry through with? The whole question of the early years, just being here, and this has been actually a bone of contention all the way up to almost to the present, of being welcome and not being welcome, and the people who were here before who resented it, or the people who moved here later and wanted to stay a certain way, and we seem to have worked through it all. There's people who fit into so many different circles that we all work together to keep it being a community where you can come and do your creativity or learn to be creative or just heal, where so many places have gotten carried away with the commercialism, and they've gone so expensive. Of course, it's getting expensive here, but gone so expensive that it has lost the cohesive, that they have lost the cohesiveness. We seem to be carrying it forward. When you see the new artists in town, I know a lot of the older artists have passed away or no longer producing. Hilda's still producing. She's one of our long-standing. Mila's mother is she's 93 now, and she's still painting. It's fabulous. But we also have, unfortunately, he just retired and moved away, but Father John, the priest at the Catholic Church, was a painter and had a painting group that he got together. They had a show a couple months ago that was fabulous. And these are, a bunch of them are weekend artists, but they're people who changed their lives to come up here and be part of what this community is. And that's where it goes back to, I cringe when people say, oh, your father saved the town. No, it's all a community. And when I see the people who are doing Kelly House, when I was a little kid, this house was a wreck. I knew the family that lived here when I was 14 or 15. And it was really in bad shape, and they had done weird stuff to it, and to see that the dedication and the love that the people who came up here, who were not native, not local, not artists, or maybe artists that I'm just not aware of. I shouldn't say. What the people have done to maintain Mendocino with the energy and the spirit that it has. The Ford House. It was when Diane, you lived there when? How long ago were you there?
1972.
And
it was a wreck.
It was a wreck. And they did a lot for it, and then after they moved, the state totally renovated it and did some weird things that we don't really agree with, but I can't fight, so that's their thing. But once again, the group of people that are involved in it, a lot of them are artists, or a lot of them are involved here and involved in the Art Center and the Humane Society and whatever. And it's really lovely to see how many people came here for the same reasons that the Zachas did. Maybe not everybody's a Bill Zacha, but it would be a real crowded room if they were. No, it would. Oh no, we would never get anything done. If ever, it would be all chiefs and no Indians. Anyway, I graduated from high school in '74 and was hell-bent on getting out of here like most of us. It was just I want to get away from the fog and the cold and the town and I know everybody's middle name, who dated who's married to, it's too complicated. And I managed to stay away for 12 years, and I got sucked back in when my children were little and we wanted them to grow up here. I didn't want them to grow up in the city. I knew what the community was here. I knew who you all were and trusted it, and so back we came. And then I tried to leave again, and that only lasted 8 months. That was in '97, and I got sucked back in. So this time, I have to face the Art Center as a grown-up. And I have taken over my mother's position on the board. And they have made it a permanent position, so I can never leave. They said, now that my mom passed away, there's this rumor going around at the Art Center. Every time I talk to somebody from the Art Center, they say, so when are you leaving for Italy? I don't have any plans. I mean, I'd love to go tomorrow. Oh, you're going tomorrow? No, I'm not going tomorrow. But it keeps going around. And at the last board meeting, someone brought up, we hear that you're moving to Italy. I said, well, I can't, because thank you very much, Alice Knapp, who was a famous board sitter in Mendocino and just retired from the Art Center after many years. She proposed as her last board action before she retired that there be, and I kid you not, a permanent Zacha seat on the board. Well, I'm the only one around, so I can't leave. So now my concern is keeping the Art Center real and keeping it available for everyone who has the enthusiasm or the interest or the desire to be involved. We had, a couple of years ago, we had this brainstorming with the guy, with people who teach you how to do management, I don't know, how to think creatively about running a nonprofit board, and we're reworking the mission statement. And the Mendocino Art Center mission statement, I don't know what the old one was, but the new one was 3 paragraphs, and it's of the Mendocino Art Center will be an art institution of the highest integrity and deepest open to people of all races, creeds, colors, abilities, And I said, and they said, well, when you start being inclusive or inclusionary, you start being exclusionary. And as soon as you say people of all, abilities, then you have to say and disabilities or inabilities and sizes, shapes, colors. Why don't we just say open to all people? It's an art school, an art establishment for all people. Just keep it simple. Instead of getting it all splintered about how we're going to be drawing. I saw the San Francisco Opera mission statement right about the same time, and it was the same paragraph. So then the next board meeting, I said, I have a revised one, and this is what I want you all to think about this. The Mendocino Art Center is, period. That's it. It speaks for itself. No, just is. And as long as the Mendocino Art Center is, there will be a big part of Mendocino that's involved in it. We hope more people. We would love to have I would love to see more cohesive work between the Kelly House and the Art Center and the state parks to get people here more. I mean, there's a lot of people on Main Street who never get 2 blocks over, and the traffic doesn't get up there. And keeping it alive by having the people come in, by knowing who to reach in the markets. It's all you have to help us with. is going to keep a spirit alive in Mendocino. And if we ever sell out, if we ever say, oh, like we almost lost it a decade ago because of debt, because they had taken a loan and had high, I don't know. It got paid off, thank you. But, you know, we almost lost it. And if we lost the Art Center, where would we, well, yeah, okay, so there'd be space over on that corner of town that they could do something with. But isn't it a tie that we all would miss? And that and it's so easy to access, it's so easy to be part of. I grew up lucky enough to be in the middle of it, you know, climbing the trees and not really caring about, oh, there's Chuck Stevenson, I could call him Chuck, and, you know, Dor babysat me, and she didn't like kids very much, but she took care of me a couple of times. And I climbed in the rafters when they were building the buildings and watched the movies, and I remember when, you know, things like where the lobby is now with the skylights, that was an outdoor patio. It was a brick patio, and there was a tree. And so then they put concrete, and then the tree started dying, and they pruned it back, and the skylight got smaller and smaller, and then they did a roof. I mean, it was like an open ceiling almost. And then they plasticked it, and then and now it's glass. Well, I wish the tree was back there. It wasn't a good climbing tree. That was not one of the good climbing trees. But seeing the artists who came and gave their lives to the Art Center, or not to the Art Center, but here and part of it, and so, I don't know, free to be involved in this organization that allowed them to also be doing their own thing. Sasha Makovkin did the ceramics programs for many years, and he also had his studio, and then in later years he was in the studio as he kind of semi-retired. But he was able to teach and do the Art Center and yet be creative on his own part. Dor had the Bothwell studio she taught every year, but she also had her studio here in town that my father built for with sinks this low. Everything's really short because Dor was very short. So whenever we rent it, we have to rent it to short people because tall people hit their heads on the ceiling. No. But the richness that those artists gave us, Ray Rice and Miriam and Hilda, and just so many of them from that era that were all kind of at our dinner table, and I never looked at their artwork. I'm now looking at it because it's at my mom's house, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with all their collections. I think it's been a very good thing, a good experience for me. It's made me a much happier, healthier, more open-minded person, and I hope that by keeping it going and by all of us having the energy for it, it continues to give that to the kids and to the other people who come here, and just sharing what we have been given by, whether it's the Zachas or Mendocino or the Art Center. There are people who never knew them. People come to me all the time, so I never got to meet your dad, but I heard about him, and you know, I came up because a friend of mine took a class here 20 years ago and said, you really need to go. The profound effect it's had, or the whole group, I just want that to be really understood in my heart, how much the whole group meant. Because they were the ones who raised me, and they were the ones at the dinner table who broadened my mind. I'll share whatever I can of mine with you all. I hope you all can share it with as many kids as you can get into the Art Center. And that's it. If you have any questions.
Lucia, you know, we're doing this exhibit on Byron Randall here, and the Ford House is doing Emmy Lou Packard. Can we talk about your family's relationship with them?
It was odd. It was a little bit. I think my dad and Emmy Lou kind of, because they were both intense artists, didn't get along really well. I don't know if it was anger. She actually had the first gallery in town, and he was sensitive about that. I mean, it was just this little nudge thing. But she moved. They closed their gallery. I think it was in early '60s, '63 or '64, and his is still there. But I remember Emmy Lou. I don't remember her husband, and I remember kind of vaguely what their son, he had long hair, and Jonathan.
Yeah.
And that was another one that was really vague because she wasn't part of. She never.
It was never part of the art center, obviously.
I don't think she really was. She was really independent, and she had her studio was.
This is Mendocino Village in.
That's right. When they moved out, but her first gallery was where Rain Song is.
Right.
And then it was over by 955, I think, and then.
Yeah, 955 was her studio.
Oh, okay. It was the
Yeah.
back side because that's the front building.
Right.
Exactly. Chuck, sir.
Lucia, you talked about being in the Albert Brown house when you first came up here and so forth. But do you remember from those halcyon days of yesteryear when your dad, I'm talking now about the mansion that was the bordello in the movie The Beaten, that burned down and your dad got hold of it? Could you tell people about that a little? The start of the Art Center.
Okay. If you go down to the Ford House, they have the diorama that Leonard Peterson did of the town, and the Art Center, on the Art Center property there's a mansion, and it was the Preston Mansion, and it was Dr. Preston. He was the one who paid for for Preston Hall. He donated the money for that. The mansion burned in, it was a chimney fire, and it was in 56. It was in 56. It wasn't in 56 because I was born January 3rd, 56, and it was gone before I was born. I think, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just because I wasn't here. The movie was filmed.
The movie was made in 54.
Right.
The mansion burned down in 56.
56.
Your dad comes up in
58. And we moved here in 58.
Yeah.
I remember when I first moved in, when this is coming in the south side where the Stevenson studio is. You know how there's those square column, the stone columns across the front of the Art Center? The ones by the cypress tree were a driveway, and then the ones where the carriage house is, where the main gallery is, were there. And then there's another set by the Stevenson. That was the main entrance to the mansion. And I remember that they still had, and it lasted many years, the wrought iron fixture that was kind of curly Q, that with the light, the gas light that went over it came up from those posts, from the cement, the stone things, and it was their yard entry light. But the mansion, by the time I saw it, it was just, I remember learning what glass was, because there was a melted window, like globs of glass, and somebody explained that it was sand, and because it looked like a glob of kind of gooey sand, because the windows had all melted in the fire. But it was completely gone. The only thing on the property was the building where the main gallery is, and the shed where the office is. That was not even, it was 3 walls and a sliding door, and it was and apartments 1, 2, and 3. There were no other, and the pump house, I guess, was there too, and the sheep shed. But that was on the next piece of property, which we rented for years, and then finally somebody bought it. But there was nothing of the mansion left at all. I've only seen it because I saw East of Eden, and they show a couple nice shots of it.
So when did your father buy the property?
50, I think it was 58, and he bought it with a real small down payment. I don't know the story exactly. It's documented. He heard that this property was for sale and that a guy was going to go over and buy it and put a trailer park there. And he beat feet and got over there, found the realtor at lunch, I think at the Seagull, or down at the hotel or something, and Daddy gave him, you would know.
$5,000.
But
That he borrowed.
But what did he put down? He went on the original sales ticket. It was like a little receipt book ticket, and it was like $60 down to hold. I mean, some real minimal amount he gave to this guy Sam Paul, who then didn't sell it to the trailer park people. So, all right, another question? Yes.
Well, I would say that he did save the town if he saved it from a trailer park.
Well, and we still do have a trailer park in town, over on this side of town.
Well, not a real resident.
Those are residents. Well, that's what,
The two ladies behind Sweetwater that we talked about?
yeah, Helen and what, yeah, whatever, and those trailers have been there, I went to grammar school and the buildings over there, and the trailers have been there, you know, I've never seen a light on it, I don't know if anybody ever turns them on. Yes, Chuck?
One more question.
Oh, you can ask all the you ask good questions, it's okay.
When you were growing up, your mother and dad and you spent a lot of time in Italy, back and forth, no?
We didn't go, the first time we went to Italy, I was 16.
Well,
We didn't.
What could you tell me, what's all that Italy stuff about in your family?
After the war, in about 51, my dad went to Italy for a year and a half. He lived in Rome, studied art, studied sculpture. Right near the Spanish Stairs, there's a little artisans area called Via Margutta, and he lived on the Via Margutta, and he got to know Jim and Anna Louise Myers. Jim was with the Marshall Plan. He was one of the main, there were like 3 accountants on the Marshall Plan, and Jim was one of them. And so Daddy hung out with that group of people, and we have all sorts of wonderful stories of, you know, episodes in their life in Rome. And then he moved back he already had the property in Marin County, and he moved back to Marin, or moved to the property. And when he grew up in Dallas, and when before he went to Italy, he had been dating either Helen or Margaret, one of my mother's roommates. I never knew which one. And when he got back, he called for her, and he had been gone a year and a half, and she had gotten married. But my mother had stayed in the apartment and kept the phone. So she was single, and she kind of, well, what are you up to, Bill? And he said, I just got back from Italy. And what are you up to? She says, well, I'm on my way out the door. She was at the height of her fashion design game, and she was going to the big, in that time in Dallas, it was a big, big industry, and they were having the opening of the fall line or the spring line, whatever. And she says, would you like to go as my date? And he said, sure. So she showed up at his place. He dug his suit out of his trunk, and she ironed it. Their first date, their whole life together started with her elbow-length white gloves ironing his suit, pressing his suit. And then he came to California, then she came and visited several times, and they got married. And she came on the train to Reno, and he met her, and they got married. And so they were in Marin from, I think he bought the property there in 48, but they got married in 54, and then they moved up here in 58. So what was the question?
Where in Marin?
We're in Summit Drive, top of Christmas Tree Hill, the highest house up. You needed a Jeep. The top half of the road was a dirt road, and they had a 4-wheel drive. It was actually the fire trail, the access to Mount Tam.
There were a lot of artists up there.
Yeah, a lot of artists and friends of theirs stayed there for many years. It was yeah.
We lived on that mountain too.
You did?
Yeah.
Yes, they were.
And they were way up, and we used to go up on the fire trail a lot.
We walked up
See
there.
the house, you know.
You knew them then?
No, we didn't know them.
But you knew where the house was.
This was in the 50s, and then we heard from later that the house was burnt down.
You didn't see it when it burned? You didn't?
No, we weren't there then, I don't think. But we used to say, oh, I wouldn't want to live in that house because it's so far up the trail.
Oh yeah, it's all the way up at the top of Summit Drive, and it burned. They had a floor furnace, and the renters who moved in when they moved up to Mendocino swept all the dirt into the floor furnace, never turned it on, and then the next renters came, fired it up, and it blew up. And
So that was their property?
yeah, they owned it. It was a shack. Daddy was. Any of you who've ever been in a building he's built, no, he was very good at, eking it, really making it work and stretching it. I don't know what he built the art center on financially. I mean, he was just very good at taking money and, well, he didn't know wiring. And the house up on Mount Tam, Jenny was coming, so he had to get some wiring in, and he put a wire, did what he thought was right, and she got there, and he very proudly turned it on, and there were like 4 lights on the line, and they said that one light came on and went off, and then the next line came on, and the next light came on, and then that went, and it popped, and that was it. I think they called the contractor to come do actual wiring for them. But it was a shack on the hillside. It's gone, and there's 3 houses now right up there. I was really fortunate in '97 when I lived down there. One day I got my kids and my parents, we all got in the car, and to get to the top of this road is pretty difficult actually, and he showed me exactly where the house was, which was I had always had one image of it, and it was really sweet to see it, and it looks out over the north. It looks over Corte Madera and Larkspur and San Quentin and that direction, and
Is the road any better?
it's paved all the way to the top now. There's a couple very, very nice houses at the top who I'm sure paved, and there's this huge water tank. It must be the water for Larkspur. So I mean, it's one of these million-gallon tank, or not that big, but a very large tank, and I wouldn't want to be there if it gives way and comes down the hill. Yes, Chuck. That's okay.
I think I joined the Art Center in '91, and you pointed out that your dad started this thing, but then, as I understand it, he went back to painting, and anyhow, ever since I was here until your mother passed away, the gut spot, the person that kept that thing going, who ran everything that needed to be run, was your mama. You want to talk about that a little?
Daddy was the kind who had inspired thoughts, had dreams that he figured out how to manifest, and they were both very good at getting people to work with him. Daddy could say, work party right now, and everybody would have gone home, gotten their gloves and their trowels, and we would have gone and cleaned up the gardens. I mean, he just had that kind of energy. And he was not a happy board sitter. I don't know. Once again, I was home. I was climbing trees. In about '73, they got to the point where he, to be totally honest, kind of resented the fact that she was so happy to just sit on boards that he didn't really want to, and so he said, fine. It's either you leave the art center or I'll leave the art center, because we need some space on this. And then he decided that he would rather be the one, and so he went back to the bay window, and from then on put all his time in the bay window. And he still taught, and he'd still give slideshows, and he would still be a presence, but he was no longer the director of the board. Maybe there were votes that happened that she's on the board and he's the director, and it was this she seemed like a very, I don't want to say a weak person, because that's not what I mean. I always think of, he was the redwood, she was the willow, and she could bend to anything he needed, but boy, like you say, she stuck in there and she did the long-term work. And he had the ideas and got the people up and let's go do it, and then she stayed and cleaned up and made sure that all the files were put away. I've got inventories of what liquor they sold at the rhododendron ball for every single ball that they ever had. She's got what was left over and how much it all cost. I mean, she really kept. I have A&E magazines. If anybody's looking for the last 15 years of A&E, she had triple archives of all of it, and they have archives at the Art Center. But in the '74 when he left, he, I think, really needed to get freed up time too. He didn't want to sit doing board stuff anymore, and had passed on as much of his energy as he could. So she got to sit on the board for another 30 years.
She ran them. I mean, she was the power that kept that place going.
Yeah, kept him in line. Well, she told me about 5 years ago, she says, Lucia, she says, I want you to get on the board now, but you can't say anything for 2 years. and you have to be a volunteer, so you get to know the guts of what's going on and how the board meetings run. Without you, didn't really have to say much more than that. And so for the first 2 years, I would, bring the cookies in and listen. And I'd throw out an occasional comment, but really didn't, just learn what the board, and I didn't realize I was learning. Well, I channeled her the other day. You can ask Chuck. We had a lively board meeting a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And I don't know, it's the first meeting I had been to since she passed away. And she hadn't been to a meeting in a couple years. She had retired from the board a couple years ago. But I channeled her. I swear, I kept coming up with, I've never made a motion on the whole time I'm making motions and seconding things, and why can't we do this and turn the, and it was kind of fun, so I hope I continue to channel her. I think it's, if I'm doomed to be on the board for my whole life, at least I can have some help from her, you know, to do it. So, yes, sir.
Well, are you really tired of questions about Italy, or maybe
No!
that's good more?
Any questions? You surprised me.
Well, you did mention what your father did before your parents were married, go to Italy,
Mm-hmm.
for a year and a half. But I had thought you and your mother and father did spend some time there at one time. And,
Okay, from the time that they moved up here until the mid-70s, it was really tight financially, and everything went into either the art center or the gallery or their home, and that we did no travel. We went to Ashland. We kept it real, and then we started when I was in the 4th grade. Every year going to Mexico, we went and saw all of Mexico, and then when I was in the 6th grade, and for a month at a time. In the 6th grade, we went to Guatemala for the month, and then stopped in Puerto Vallarta on the way home for vacation. When I was in the 7th grade, my dad was hired by the USAID, U.S. Information Service, to teach at the Escuela de Bellas Artes in Tegucigalpa, and he taught a 6-week course in watercolor. As far as I know, I never went to the class, but I think it was watercolor. And then we took a 6-week trip, and I went to the American school there in Tegucigalpa. And then the following 6 weeks, we traveled all the way down through Central and South America as far as Bolivia. And then on my mother's birthday, we flew from La Paz to Lima to Panama City to Guatemala City to Mexico City to Puerto Vallarta, all in one day. 5 countries in one day. And so that was when we really started doing more of the traveling. And a couple years later, 3 years later, we went to Europe for the first time. And that was when I was 16. And then when I was 20, they decided to spend a year in Italy. And so I went to the junior year abroad in Florence, and they were in Rome. And whenever I got fed up with Florence, I'd hop the train and go to Rome and go to the opera with my parents. It was great. It was wonderful. It was
And you fall out of my South Naples.
After we got back, that was in 80. See, I graduated in 80, so that would have been 76, 77 when we lived there. And then I got home, and I'd been a drama major, and because we had been in Italy, I changed my major to classical archaeology, and I was going to UC Santa Barbara. So I finally got my degree in classical archaeology, Roman emphasis, Sicilian specifically, but that's my life. That's all there. And in I don't know, the mid-80s, 87 maybe, it was 1990, because it was when I opened the travel agency. They bought an apartment. It had been a Franciscan monastery, I think Daddy used to say, some monastery. And this thing had 4-foot thick walls. It was like a duplex that was on the part of this building, backside, whatever, in Scario, which is several hours south of Naples. It's on the Bay of Salerno, on the Bay of the Gulf di Policastro, but it's probably just near Salerno is the biggest city nearby. And he lived there for 2 or 3 years, but his health was getting so bad that the trip was such an ordeal, and he was pretty isolated, and my mom didn't want to be there. We all think of how sunny Italy. There are places in Italy it's not sunny, and one of them is the Golfo di Policastro, because there's this mountain between Naples. There's Vesuvius and Naples and Vesuvius, and then there's Monte Bulgaria, and it's not a very big mountain, but it's enough that all the weather patterns are really squirrely. And he would write and say, I have a letter from him, said, it's raining over Bulgaria. Well, Bulgaria is Bulgaria, like Bulgaria. And I'm going, and? It's raining over Bulgaria. That's 1,000 miles away. No. When he says it's raining over Bulgaria, it means it's raining up by Mendoza's, and I've got to go, because it was right up behind the building. I've got to go get the laundry in that's on the line, or it's going to be soaked for the 3rd time today, because it was just squall after squall. except in July and August. In July and August, it's just that fabulous, perfect, hot Italian summer weather. But you can rent out these little places for $5,000 a month. And so you leave for July and August and finance the whole year, the rest of the year, when it's rainy and nasty. And you miss the wonderful time because you're, so after a couple of years of that, you realized it was silly to be doing that. So sold that and bought the apartment in Puerto Vallarta, and that was in 94, 93, something like that. And it was a 3-hour flight, and we could drive him to the city and put him on the plane. Rome, in Italy, he always had a dog. He even had Lola. He took poor Lola to Italy, and here's my dad who could hardly walk, and his back was bad, and he's got his suitcase and his pipe and Lola in her cage, and he's got to get from here to there to the train to, and it was just, Daddy, you did it in the 50s. If you're going to do it now, at least don't have the dog with you. But he insisted on Lola going with him. But the time between when I was 16 and 21 was when they did most of the European stuff. And then they very much, thank you very much. I graduated from UC Santa Barbara in March of 1980. And they were leaving 2 days later to go around the world on the Pan Am. Had this around the world in 80 days for $999, first class standby. I was convinced that when I showed up at the hotel in San Francisco, they would say, oh, by the way, we have your passport and a ticket and you're going with us. No, they said, let's have dinner and we'll see you in 2 months. You're running the gallery. Thanks a lot. I was disappointed. So I had to drive on home and didn't get to go around the world with them. So life's rough.
What year was that?
In 1980, March of 1980.
Tell us about Miasa.
Yeah, that was going to
All
ask, the
right.
first trip to Japan.
Their first trip was in '64, and he was inspired by Hiroshige, the Japanese woodblock artist, to do a series of prints, a series of images of the Tokaido, which is the main highway between Tokyo and Kyoto, basically. And there's 55 stations, including the beginning and end. And Hiroshige had done these wood blocks of the 53 inside. He didn't do the beginning and end, so he only has 53. But Daddy was determined to find the scenes and duplicate them, but in his vision. And some of them he found. There's one there's a bridge, an old sod bridge that in '64, when they saw it, there were the people going across with the old paper umbrellas in the rain, and it's one of the ones that has been very popular. It was so lovely, one of the prints of the Tokaido. But when he got home, when they went back in '67, the bridge was gone and is now a big concrete truck bridge, So he saw the first time he was in Japan in '64. They were there 3 months, and he really did the bulk of his, I won't say impressions, the bulk of his ideas then were kind of set. And then he went back, I think 17 times. And he actually met Toshi here, and it would have been probably the early 70s. And Toshi came to see Mendocino, Toshi Yoshida, who's the Miasa artist, the other end. He came to Mendocino and 2 other art schools in the U.S., and I want to say Idlewild, but I don't know. It's in the records at the Art Center, to see how they were created, how they were run, because he had access to an old school in Miasa that he wanted to turn into an art center, like what he was looking for. And he and my dad hit it off, and so they got to be good friends. That's why we still have Yoshida works in the gallery. And so he went back and forth, and Daddy would go and spend the time with Toshi, and they'd go to Miasa, and they met a lot of the people. And then it started evolving. Paul Sutterly, and I don't know how it got past just Toshi and my dad, but it became a friendship group. I mean, and then Toshi would come to visit, and he taught at the Art Center several times. And then gradually it developed into what became Friendship Park and the whole Miasa Exchange program. It's been, what, 15 or 16 years? Does anybody know how long the exchange program's been going? Where the middle school, 1 year our middle school kids go there, and it's about a 10-day trip. And then the following year, the Japanese will send a group. When Friendship Park was finished, the Little League ballpark, they sent a team over for opening day. I mean, that's how strong it's gotten. There are kids who, Travis Erzblinski has gone to school over there for a year because of the exchange program. So it's had a lot of cross-cultural effects for a lot of people outside the art community. It's another one of those reverberations, because the Yoshidas were there for a while, but Miasa is kind of like Laytonville or Branscombe. Yeah, it's little, 2 or 3 houses here and there, little clusters. There is no village center. There's no, town square. And the people are farmers, and they're real basic, healthy, wonderful, lovely, happy people. But when the Yoshidas were there, that stimulation was there. The Bunka Center, which was this school that they had purchased to have the art center in, was a beautiful, I only saw it once, a big old traditional Japanese, big beams, tatami mats, all shoji, cold as ice. We were there we stayed there 2 nights, and it was I think we were there in April, and we froze. I mean, this is in the mountains. I have such admiration for the Japanese, how they can survive their climate. But then then the Bunka Center burned. And I don't know what year it burned, but I think it was in the late 80s. And the townspeople, unlike the townspeople here, weren't behind it. The Yoshidas weren't there. They were kind of part-timers who would come and be there for the weekends to do their things. And when the Bunka Center burned, they left, and they went back to Tokyo. And the Miasa Mendocino Sister City organization, whatever, has continued because of people way beyond the art community. It's all the other ones who got involved and who really saw it as a valuable asset for our kids and for their kids. But there's no art, there's no art community in Miasa to speak of that I know of. I mean, there are artists there, but it's not like Mendocino is. It didn't draw a lot of people to move, and maybe in Japan the culture doesn't allow people to just up and I'm going to go move where there's art happening. I don't know how structured their society is, but it's not like here. And so it stayed, and it stayed the farming hamlet as much as anything. And the Yoshidas they're still in Tokyo. They still have the Yoshida Gallery and studio and everything. So they're thriving in their own right. Toshi's children and grandchildren are all woodblock. They're all artists. It's amazing. The little kids are wonderful artists. It didn't skip a generation with them. But
I'd be willing to say that the cultural exchange program is so significant, the fact that the art center can click minor.
right, exactly.
But that's still going on.
Yeah.
And we need more of those throughout the world. More sister city programs.
Well, and it's amazing how many there are. I mean, you hear all the towns around here have set up sister city programs. Not all of them travel back and forth and have such a strong bond, but it's really cool to see that that's happening in our world today, that kids are being educated that way. Yes, Nick?
I just thought I would make note of the monument out on the headland.
Yes.
I remember being there when that was dedicated.
Toshi was there, and Norman Duvall was, I think
I've got photos in the archive, and I'll take them out. I've got a new printer, I'll be making prints.
all right, and get them on the website, email them to everybody who leaves their name. Any questions? Anything? Yes.
Is this why with all the traveling you were able to do, you became a travel agent?
I think so. And traveling with him was just astounding, because you'd be walking down the street and he knew he did his homework before we went, and he'd say, oh, and that building was built in 1204, and that building was, and this was, and look in here, and He'd show you down a little alley where there's a sculpture hidden back in a corner that nobody ever sees, and can get. And he's always way ahead of you, so you're always working to keep up with him. And I had the impression that he had, and then I just figured this out recently. He would say, okay, dinner table, he'd say, all right, we're going to Italy in June. Never, Jenny, are you interested in going to Italy? Lucia, what are your plans? We're going to Italy in June. And then he'd start rearranging everything on the dinner table. And there's his dishes and coffee and tea or wine glasses. And he'd straighten it out and he'd say, okay, we fly from San Francisco on the 12th. Get to Rome on the 13th. We'll be at the hotel by noon, and there's a 3 o'clock performance and he'd like go through the whole month. He'd give you the entire trip, the entire itinerary, everything you were going to do, all the hours, he knew all the museum hours, and I believed it for so many years, until just recently I figured out what he thought about all the things what the schedule was 30 years ago for the buses to the Vatican. And it was probably still the same schedule, but he kind of like would fantasize the whole trip, and then in the morning he'd say, Jenny, I need to go get my coffee and have my pipe. And he'd go out, we'd be in Rome or wherever, and he'd disappear, and Mama and I would have the extra hour, and we'd get ourselves together, and he would finally come back, and he would have had his double shot of espresso and his pipe, and he would have also gone to the ticket counter, to the opera, to the museum. He'd know exactly, we're in Rome for 3 days, he'd know what was playing for the next 3 days, he'd have bought tickets to 3 different events, he'd know what time the Vatican closed, so get there at this time, and you'd go boom, 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 and you'd see all these things. And I've never, even doing tour groups, I've never been able to arrange it the way he always got you there when you didn't have to stand in line for hours, and got you right through, and he knew, let's not waste time going through the side galleries here, because there's a Caravaggio over here I want you to see. Okay, and so you go that way. And it was always like that. He never asked what you wanted to do, never gave you any slack. No, he'd give you slack, but he never said, will you go take the afternoon off? It was this afternoon we've got to get, and he didn't do tour guides. Once in a while he would do, we did maybe 2 tour buses. One was in Greece with Iphigenia. He always laughed at this chubby little Greek lady, and we have no idea what we saw, but it was very pretty. So we never did tours, but he did his homework beforehand and knew what we were going to see, but he had us totally bluffed because he would just pick the things out as we got there. So I finally, after years and years, I think, God, he's been writing to museums and knows all the exhibits in advance, and nobody ever questioned him. He assumed he had. And it was fun traveling with him. And he wouldn't ever stay in the 5-star or the 4-star, and preferably not the 3-star. 2 stars were fine as long as they were clean, and you had privacy and stuff. And so he could, like building the Art Center on a shoestring, he traveled us places on shoestrings and had a great time doing it. Yes, sir.
You talked about Bill's, your dad's art stuff. You mentioned the theater was built in 1970 or something. And how did he get into being a thespian in addition?
During World War II, he was in the Navy, in the South Pacific, and in 4 years on board ship during the war, he had a total of 3 months. Total, all hours together, 3 months ashore. And after about 3.5 years, it just about cracked him up. And he went to the doctor, he says, I'm shaking, I can't handle this. And the doctor, there was a USO tour coming through. And the doctor said, go on the USO tour for a while. So he did, and he got to do theater on the tour. He had a great time, got his feet back on the ground, made great friends with a woman named Helen Sherney, who was the director of the plays that they were doing on the tour, which is why it's named the Helen Sherney Theater. Nobody in Mendocino can even say her name. It's Shoeni. It's the German spelling. Everybody calls it the Shoney. It's not the Shoney, it's the Sherney. Yeah, thank you. And when he moved up here, I think he named it to her for her in gratitude, because he thinks she saved his life because of just, the ship and everything. It was designed as a children's theater. That's why there's no wings, there's no fly space, there's no backstage to speak of. There were 2 small dressing rooms on each side. Well, now there's 1 small on each side. One stores all the paint and one is the green room, so it's a little less room to move around. But they built it as a children's theater. It was 80 seats. It was all open. There were windows on both sides into classrooms. So it was supposed to be more like a lecture space, open space with the big lobbies on both sides. And then they were going to build a big theater in the round on the southeast corner of the property. And I'd like to have people keep an eye out. I've asked for it. There was a board that hung in the hallway where the coffee maker is. When the kitchen was a through hallway, there was a floor plan of the whole art center and his dream. And one of those thermometers, you know, that you put the money on, you put the red line on as they made money and to cover it. By the time they got to thinking about doing the theater in the round, all the building codes have been changing and the footprint codes. I don't know what really stopped it, maybe just finances. But it was supposed to be a big conference center type, you know, something that could be used for lectures or performances. And unfortunately it's never happened, but the theater has now been running for 35 years. We have a full-time season with a company that does 6 shows a year, you know, and yeah, they're small and it's a 90-seat house, give or take, but I think most of you have been to plays there. Looking around, I think you have. He designed it. Bob Nelson built it. And Bob was one of the old-time contractors around here for many years. It had the worst part, or the nicest part, it had plastic domes like at my parents' house, the whole length of the audience. So you couldn't do matinees because it was hotter than blazes in there. So they finally took the domes out and put the ceiling. And if it rained, you couldn't hear diddly. That's right. Yeah, hailstorms were a hell on the roof. Yeah. So but it's still going, and they're sustaining themselves, and we get rent from them every month for the art center, and they take care of all their own stuff, which is, for a long time the art center tried to run it, and it was hard. It was just, you know, here he was trying to be in a play and be the director and run the gallery, and it was just too many things going on. There was, actually, if you're ever backstage, on the east side on stage left, when you're backstage, there's a water heater in the corner. Look behind the water heater. There's sheetrock with just a real simple kind of green leaf pattern, you know, with the red dot, kind of the real simple crosshatch pattern. It was the set for Who in the World Would Drink Warm Buttermilk with your mother, sorry, Peter, Bruce, with your mom, and I think Una, and Jim Bertram, and it was the set, but they were just building the theater, and Daddy, being the economical person that he was, used the sheetrock that they were going to put in the theater for sets because they could move it later, and they did, and there's still a patch about so big that is the set painting from Who in the World Would Drink Warm Buttermilk. And they did that performance in the Nichols studio where the mosaic is. That was larger in those days, and we're able to. Yes, Scott?
I am familiar with the blueprints you're referring to, asking about them later when we're talking about some other things.
They are still
I have seen
existent.
them. I believe I know
You
where
have
they
seen
are.
them. Now I have seen them, but
I believe I know where they are.
okay, cool.
And the second thing is, I have a question. How would Jenny like the community to remember her? What about her? What about her contribution? How would she want us to remember her?
A gracious hostess.
A gracious hostess.
One thing.
That's it. You know, it's like, well, put it this way. She was an Illinois farm girl. And she educated herself up to the point of my father accepting her. He was very intolerant of poor English and slack manners, and you had to be a lady and you behaved, and not that she was not a lady, but I mean, she created herself through the design world. She had been, I think she was working in a bank in Dallas. She had gone to Dallas to go to SMU she grew up in Illinois. And someone at the bank saw what she kept admiring her clothes and said, "Where do you get your clothes?" And she said, "I design them myself." And he got her a job with Ike Clark, who was, you know, the Ralph Lauren of Dallas in those days. I mean, this was big stuff. And there was an elegance that she cultivated without being arrogant. You know, so a lot of elegant people tend to get snooty, and she never would be like that. And I think she wouldn't want anybody to remember her that way. She would want people, okay, every time I hauled her to the hospital in the last 3 years when she was so ill, on the way to the hospital she would say, "Do I have my makeup bag?" She had to, when she saw the doctor in the morning, she had to be presentable. She never went to mass in sweats, you know? That's just you. When I opened my travel agency in 1990, the post office still had the rail at the south end of and I climbed over the rail all the time. And she said, one day she says, "Lucia, you're now a businesswoman in this town and you have to have your integrity and dignity maintained. You cannot climb over the rail at the post office anymore." But that's where, you know, she was a product of, I mean, she was born in 1918, and she understood what manners and dignity were, and she worked her way from being a farm girl to being a very elegant woman who held no airs, you know? It was a bit sad the last few years, you know, you all probably know she was kind of getting some dementia and forgetting things. She had always sewn and designed her own clothes, designed most of the things she wore. I'm thinking back, in the last month of going through her room and her workroom and her closets, I have found several of her dresses, 2 of which are fabulous, beautiful fabrics that she's rebuilt over the years 2 or 3 times. And one of them I've always wanted because I love this fabric. Well, I noticed the other day it's full of pins. She has dismantled it with the intention of redesigning it, reconfiguring it, and she doesn't remember how to sew. So she couldn't put it back together. So I have half a dozen of her best dresses are pinned together. But you know, she never got to the point where everybody said, "Oh, there's that Jenny, she's wandering around town, you know, she's lost it." She was always home and had her dignity, and when she went out, it was always with grace. And the last Sunday that she was alive, she died Sunday morning, the prior Sunday, we went to Mass, she went to communion, we went out to breakfast at Little River Inn, and she had mimosas and eggs Benedict, and then she went out to dinner with Vicki at friend's house, and they had a wonderful dinner. I mean, right up to the end, she was totally together as far as enjoying herself and having her, you know, people around her that she felt happy with, and she didn't worry about that out there. It was all gone. Yes, dear?
Mention your thoughts about finishing the dresses.
Oh, well, this is, yeah. You know, you have to liquidate houses, unfortunately. I don't need 3 blenders and everything. So we're going through, and she has so many textiles. She has drawers and trunks and suitcases and boxes full of textiles all over the house. We are going to have next month, and it'll be announced somewhere, and we're aiming mostly at the textile people, or if you're a fabric, if you are into textiles, please come. I don't know when it'll be, but mid-August. We're going to pull all her textiles out and have people there is a plastic bag for every single thing she ever made. Velvets and silks from 50 years ago. Coats she made when I was a baby. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Quilters please come. But we also, at that event, or gathering, I found in the back room in her workroom, a yellow smock. Just kind of a painter's, artist smock, very simple, bright yellow, and it's all pinned together. And some of it is stitched, but not much. And we're going to auction it as a benefit, probably for the Pacific Textile Program, the Weavers Guild. I don't know if she'd like it, but that's too bad. I think they need it. We'll do something for the Art Center. We'll do something for Kelly House. But auction, specifically that one, as a collaborative piece. You can buy it, and Jenny designed it and has it all put together, and you get to finish it off and do your own thing to it. So, and there are some of her other dresses that are these beautiful fabrics, and they're all pinned together. I don't sew, so I'm not seeing myself doing anything with them, and I would be honored if people were to take them and make them into something. Either try to follow the old seam lines, try to rebuild what she had, or make it into something for yourself. I think she would love that. So.
Can I ask one more?
Yes, ma'am.
Jenny? What do you think? It's a two-part question.
Okay.
What do you think Jenny thinks, and then what do you think? Could you get your mother? What her greatest contribution to this community is?
The Art Center. Pardon me? What do you think?
Bill Zacha's wife.
Being Bill Zacha's wife. Being there to support him.
Yeah.
She stepped in and believed, she stepped in and supported everything he believed in. She never said, I don't want to go to the the Tivoli, I want to go to the Trevi Fountain today. No, she supported his choice and worked totally tirelessly, totally without remuneration, financial remuneration, for all those years at the Art Center to support him. So you're right, Holly. That's.
Well, she always talked about how good Bill was, that she really got a good husband, that he provided and inspired her.
She adored him.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Nick?
Well, regarding financing, I remember Bill telling his story of how he had come to own the building where the family was.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gallery.
Yeah, yeah. The bay window was there.
But so then when he was able to sell it to the
Betty
Doss,
Dostal, yeah.
for their clock shop, and he carried the notes, so he was getting the most of income. He told me that allowed him to serve full-time at the Art Center, living on that income for I think 20 years.
I didn't know that.
Therefore, he didn't have to take any remuneration.
He took $1 a year was his pay at the Art Center.
But anyway, he said that's how he managed.
Yeah. Well, and they bought that, okay, in 58 or 59, I don't know. And the first bay window was upstairs on the east side of the building. And then they moved it, they built back where Ed O'Brien's leather place is, it was just a shed, they put a laundromat there, there's no laundromat in town. Put a laundromat there and then put the bay window upstairs. And it was there for a while, for a couple of years. Then they did it downstairs on the east half of the building, and it had been Chet Bishop's general store on the west side of the building, and then I guess I don't know if something else, I don't remember anything else ever being in there, but one day he had just come back from fixing another broken toilet, and he was in the gallery, and he was just disgusted with dealing with this broken down building, and he's going on about it, and this woman's standing there, and she says, oh, he goes, I'd sell it in a minute if someone would give me the right amount of money. And she said, how much do you want? And I wish I knew how much he charged. He just pulled the number out. He didn't get appraisers, he didn't do anything. He just pulled the number of what, and it was like, I want to think I remember it being like $325,000, and this was in would have been 66 or so. She said, would a $50,000 down payment be all right? She wrote him a check. He walked home. He said, Jenny, I sold the Elliott building, and handed her a check for $50,000. She's like, whoa, this is good. And they did They bought the building where the gallery is, where Panache Gallery is now, but it was the bay window for many years, where Hilda lives upstairs. And it was just a shell, and they renovated it, or they finished it, and, you know, got the windows in and moved the.
Early 70s.
I think, yeah, it was opened by 1970, I think. You don't think so?
I got photos of guys sitting playing guitars on the foundations under the
Oh, really?
bay window on Main Street while it was under construction.
Okay.
And it was in the early, about 73 or 4 or something.
Okay, you know, it was, well, I'm not sure. Let's see, how old would I have been? I was about, well, when I was about 7, there was a ring at the gallery that I loved. And it got stolen. It was a little pearl thing, it wasn't very expensive. He had nice jewelry. A couple years later, there was another ring I loved, and it got stolen. And when I was 11, there was a Jean Crotty ring, a sapphire, star sapphire and diamond, and they were already in the bay window, they were already in the new space by then, because I remember seeing it in the case, so that would have been like 11, I was born in 56, so 67, it was already done, because
Well, they must have added on to it then.
they did the first, and then they did,
Okay, the bay window part that comes out onto Main Street, that part of it.
that they built that, you know, I don't know if it was exactly the same time. But the ring, I was 11, and he said, but you're too young to wear it out of the house, and you have to pay for it. And I got $1 a week allowance. And so I said, okay, I'll give up my allowance, $150. I said, I'll give up my allowance for 3 years, and including taxes, $156. It was even, exactly 3 years. And then it really chapped his hide, because I would go in and get his business cards, you know how expensive they are. I'd go in the gallery and get a business card and write, Daddy, I owe you 25 cents, and stick it in the drawer and take a quarter. And yeah, it's like, this is, so he started saving the business cards, and he finally had a little stack of 8 or 9 of them with, I owe you 30 cents, 10 cents, whatever. And I would, after that, just go, oh, how much do I need today? And I'd take that and put that and take the money. He said he later figured out that my giving up my allowance to buy that ring cost him about $2 extra a week, me taking it out of the till. So, busted, anyhow. Question? Yes, Chuck?
I bet of the people here this very moment, there are some besides us that wouldn't have come excuse me, for Bill and Jennie.
Well, there are a few. There
Well,
are
I'd
a
like
few.
to say it's a living legacy. My 4 children were all affected by the Art Center. My first 3 were all first in musical theater there. At the
Yeah.
theater with the storybook players, and my last one after his accident found his future by
In the pottery.
In the
Yeah.
pottery class, he was stuck on crutches and couldn't do anything, any sports, until 9 o'clock at night throwing pots, and suddenly he started hearing music. Now he's a music major in college.
And a potter.
And still a potter.
Still a potter.
So thank you, Bill and Jennie.
Thank you, Bobo. Thank you, Mama.
We do have some cookies and some coffee out here, if anybody's interested in that. I'm sure you can catch Jenny.
I don't think you can catch Jenny anywhere these days. You can catch Jenny up on the hill there, go talk to her.